The research chamber was cold and quiet. Hyun Seo stood alone in the darkness, looking at the glowing screens that filled the room. For many years, she had worked as a scientist for the Vidalian Council, studying the ancient civilizations that had existed long before her people had even learned to travel between stars. Her job was to understand the past, to learn from the mistakes of dead species, and to help her own people build a better future. But today, something she had discovered was making her question everything she thought she knew about the galaxy and the life that filled it. The artifact sat on the metal table in front of her. It was not large, just a small cube made of crystal and old metal. The symbols carved into its surface told the story of the Valorian Empire, a civilization that had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago. The Valorians had been powerful beyond imagination. They had controlled hundreds of star systems. They had built cities that floated in the sky and machines that could reshape planets. And then, suddenly, they had disappeared. All that remained of them were these ruins scattered across dead worlds and empty space. Hyun Seo placed her hand on the crystal cube and activated it. A hologram flickered to life, showing an old message recorded in the Valorian language. The computer system translated it for her, converting the ancient words into the speech of her people. The message was short, but the words made Hyun Seo's blood feel cold. It said, "Whatever you do, do not enrage the humans." She had seen this message before, 3 times before to be exact. Each time, she had told herself that it was just a translation error, or perhaps a joke, or some kind of riddle that she did not yet understand. But finding it again in the Valorian archives made her realize something important. This was not an accident. This was not a mistake. The Valorians had deliberately left this warning for whoever came after them. Hyun Seo activated the database search function. She typed in a simple command: find all mentions of the word humans in the prehistorical archives. The computer worked for several minutes, and then screens filled with results. There were hundreds of them, thousands even. Mentions of humans appeared in records from the Krell Empire, from the Shexmora dynasty, from the Thanagian Collective, and from 17 other ancient civilizations whose names she could barely pronounce. With growing excitement and fear, Hyun Seo opened the oldest records first. The Krell message was almost identical to the Valorian one. Do not make enemies of the humans. The Shexmora had written a longer warning, but the core message was the same. Never underestimate humanity's capacity for survival and revenge. The Thanagian Collective had simply stated, the humans must never be threatened, for if they are, we will not survive. Hyun Seo sat down in the nearest chair, her legs suddenly too weak to support her body. In all of her years of study, she had never noticed this pattern. How could she have missed it? How could anyone have missed it? Every single ancient civilization, every species that had dominated the galaxy before the current age had left the same warning about humans. It was as if they had all encountered something terrifying, something that had scared them enough to leave messages for future generations. But that made no sense. Humans were a young species. They had only recently begun traveling between stars. They had established colonies on a few worlds, but they did not control any major trade routes. They were not members of the Galactic Commonwealth because they had not yet advanced far enough to meet the requirements for membership. Humans were not powerful. They were not threatening. So why would the greatest civilizations ever to exist warn so seriously about them? Hyun Seo knew she had to investigate this further. She spent the next several hours searching through every database she could access. She read reports filed by traders who had visited human worlds. She studied the few pieces of video footage that showed humans during official meetings with other species. She examined the military records of every encounter between human ships and the vessels of other civilizations. What she found was disturbing. There were not many incidents, but the ones that existed seemed to follow a pattern. A species would attempt to take something from humans or to exploit them in some way. And then, suddenly, the problem would disappear. Not through negotiation or diplomatic channels, not through war or formal conflict. The problems would simply vanish, as if they had never existed at all. One of the clearest examples involved a Zenithian merchant captain named Vortok. According to the records, Vortok had made an agreement with human representatives to purchase certain minerals from a human-controlled world. The deal had seemed simple and fair. But then Vortok had decided to ignore the agreement. He had sent mining ships to the planet and began extracting the minerals without paying for them. The Zenithian captain had probably thought that the young human species would not have the power to stop him, but the humans had responded. A single human ship had arrived at the mining site. A single pilot had disabled all of Vortok's vessels without firing a single shot. The message that the human pilot had left was brief: "Do not return." And Vortok had never returned. In fact, according to the records, the Zenithian captain had left human space immediately and had never attempted any business with humans again. There were similar incidents throughout history. When a Krell research team had tried to perform genetic experiments on human subjects without permission, the team had disappeared. When the Shex Mora had attempted to establish control over a human colony, their military forces had been destroyed. When the Thanagian Collective had sent a military expedition to claim a human world as their own, the entire expedition had been wiped out. In each case, the humans had not made a big show of their response. They had not declared war or issued formal complaints to the Commonwealth. They had simply solved the problem and moved on. Hyun-seo realized that she was looking at a terrible truth. Humans were not weak. Humans were not peaceful. Humans were something far more dangerous. They were a species that identified threats and eliminated them. They did it carefully, quietly, and completely. And they had been doing this for thousands of years, long before most current species had even developed space travel. She decided to present her findings to the Vidalian Council. She spent 3 days preparing her report, gathering evidence, and organizing her thoughts. She wanted to make sure that every member of the council would understand what she had discovered and why it mattered. The presentation was scheduled for the next morning. As Hyun-seo left the research chamber that night, she looked back at the glowing screens one more time. The Valorian message still hung in the air, displayed in holographic light. "Whatever you do, do not enrage the humans." Now she understood what the ancient civilization had been trying to say. They were not warning about a threat from a distant enemy. They were warning about something much more serious. They were warning about a species that, if pushed too far, would not stop until every threat to its existence had been completely removed. The next morning, when she walked into the council chambers, Hyun-seo knew that her life was about to change. The words she was about to speak would make the Commonwealth reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. And more importantly, they would force the leaders of the galaxy to ask themselves a dangerous question. What if the ancient warnings had been telling the truth? What if humans really were something that should never be underestimated or threatened? The future of galactic peace might depend on the answer. The sky above Keldorian was dark and full of stars. Teo stood on the observation deck of the small Earth Defense Fleet station, looking out at the cosmos. He was a human pilot, one of the best in the fleet, and he had spent the last 5 years studying space combat and military strategy. His commanders had taught him that in the galaxy, strength came from being smarter than your enemy, not from having more weapons or bigger ships. Teo had learned this lesson well. Below him, on the surface of Keldorian, something was happening that made his blood boil. A mining colony of Zenithians had established itself on a protected world. This world was supposed to be off-limits to outside exploitation. The United Nations of Earth had made an agreement with the local species that lived on Keldorian, promising to protect them from outside interference. The Zenithians did not care about that agreement. They had simply begun mining the planet, taking the valuable crystals that grew in the planet's crust. They had displaced thousands of local inhabitants. They had destroyed forests and polluted the water, and the Galactic Commonwealth had done nothing to stop them. Teo had requested permission to intervene. His commanders had been hesitant. Teo was only one pilot. The Zenithian fleet had 40 ships, each one larger and better armed than his own fighter. It seemed like madness to send one man against such a force. But Teo's commanders knew something that most other species did not. They knew that Teo was not just a pilot, he was a strategist, and he had spent months studying the Zenithian military, learning their tactics, understanding their strengths, and finding their weaknesses. Finally, the order had come through. Teo could intervene, but he had to be careful. He could not start a war between Earth and the Zenithian Empire. He could only stop the mining operation and send the Zenithians away. It was a difficult task, but Teo believed he could do it. He entered his fighter and ran through the pre-flight checks. Every system was working perfectly. The weapons were armed, but Teo did not plan to use them. His fighter was equipped with technology that other species did not fully understand, systems that his people had developed over many years of careful research. His fighter could do things that would seem impossible to a Zenithian weapons officer. The launch sequence began. Teo felt the familiar push of acceleration as his fighter shot away from the station and headed down toward Keldorian. As he flew through the atmosphere, he reviewed his plan one more time. The Zenithian fleet was arranged in a defensive pattern around their mining operations. They had placed their command ship at the center, with defensive vessels positioned at regular intervals. To stop them, Teo needed to disable their communication systems first. Once the fleet could not receive orders, the individual ships would be confused and disorganized. Teo approached the Zenithian fleet from an unexpected angle, slipping through their defensive perimeter before they even realized he was coming. His fighter's weapons systems targeted the communications array on the Zenithian command ship. It was a difficult shot, requiring perfect timing and precision. Most pilots would not have attempted it. But Teo had trained for this exact moment. The shot was perfect. The communications array went dark. Instantly, the Zenithian fleet began to malfunction. Without orders from their command ship, the defensive vessels became confused. They started moving in random patterns, no longer coordinated or organized. Teo used this moment of confusion to target their weapon systems one by one. He did not destroy them. He simply disabled them, making sure that every weapon on every Zenithian ship was offline and useless. The entire operation took less than 10 minutes. When Teo's communications officer came online, the pilot's voice was calm and quiet. He spoke in the Zenithian language, which he had learned from studying their broadcasts. "This is Captain Teo of Earth Defense. You have 1 hour to power down your mining operations and prepare for evacuation. After that time, if you have not left this system, I will make this situation personal." The Zenithian command officer's response was angry and dismissive. "We have 40 ships, human. You have 1 fighter. Leave now before we destroy you." But the command officer did not understand what had just happened. He did not understand that every weapon in his fleet had been disabled. He did not understand that he was no longer in a position to make threats. Teo's response was simple and direct. "Check your weapons systems, Zenithian, then make your decision." There was a long pause. Teo watched as the Zenithian ships began to power down their mining equipment. As the minutes passed, the evacuation shuttles started launching from the planet's surface. The Zenithians were leaving. They had understood the message. Resistance was impossible. Before the hour was up, every Zenithian ship had left the system. As his fighter returned to the station, Teo reflected on what he had just accomplished. He had not fired a single shot. He had not destroyed any ships. He had simply demonstrated that the Zenithians were not in control of the situation. One human pilot, armed with knowledge and strategy, had defeated an entire fleet without violence. But Teo knew this action would have serious consequences. The Zenithians would report this incident to the Galactic Commonwealth. The Commonwealth would demand explanations. And Earth would have to answer some very difficult questions about why a young species had the capability to disable an advanced military fleet. What Teo did not know was that his action had already been reported. The Zenithian command officer, humiliated by his defeat, had sent a message to every major power in the Commonwealth. He had described how a single human ship had destroyed his ability to fight back. He had warned that humanity possessed weapons technology that defied conventional understanding, and most importantly, he had spread fear. Other species began to wonder what humans were truly capable of. The incident at Keldorian became the focus of emergency meetings across the galaxy. Military leaders studied the data from the battle. Scientists analyzed the disabled Zenithian ships, trying to understand what kind of weapons could shut down an entire fleet without causing any physical damage. Diplomats argued about what the correct response should be to Earth's actions. In the Commonwealth capital, High Arbiter Hyun-Seo watched the situation unfold with growing alarm. She had been preparing her report about the ancient warnings, and now the evidence was appearing in real time. A single human pilot had challenged an entire military fleet and won. The species that the ancient civilizations had warned about was beginning to reveal itself to the galaxy, and most of the Commonwealth had no idea what was coming next. Hyun-Seo made an urgent decision. She contacted the Earth Defense Fleet through official diplomatic channels. She requested a meeting with the human leadership. She wanted to know, before tensions escalated further, what humanity's true intentions were. Was Earth trying to start a conflict with the Commonwealth? Or was there another explanation for what had happened at Keldorian? The response came quickly. Earth's leaders were willing to meet, but they would do so on their terms, at a location of their choosing. Hyun-Seo understood that this was a demonstration of power. The humans were showing that they controlled the situation, not the Commonwealth. She accepted their terms and began the journey to Earth, knowing that whatever happened in that meeting would change the galaxy forever. As her ship approached the blue world that humans called home, Hyun-Seo could not help but think of the ancient warnings. Every elder species that had ever encountered humanity had left the same message: do not enrage them. And now, for the first time in thousands of years, the Commonwealth was about to have a direct conversation with the species that had terrified the greatest civilizations ever to exist. The High Arbiter knew that the next few hours would determine whether that conversation would lead to peace or to the end of everything. Ji-Woo sat in a secure research facility that was hidden deep beneath the city of Seoul. The facility was so secret that very few people knew it existed. It was here, in these underground rooms filled with computers and data, that Earth's military leadership came to study the Commonwealth and understand the threats that faced humanity. Ji-Woo was an intelligence officer, which meant his job was to gather information, analyze it, and present it to the commanders who made decisions about Earth's security. For the last 6 months, Ji-Woo had been working on a project that had consumed every moment of his life. The Keldorian incident had raised important questions about humanity's place in the galaxy. The Commonwealth was becoming frightened of Earth. And frightened species did unpredictable things. Ji-Woo needed to understand what the Commonwealth knew about humanity, and more importantly, what they were planning to do about it. He started by gathering all available data about military encounters between humans and other species. The records went back hundreds of years, to the first time humans had achieved space travel and begun making contact with alien civilizations. In those early years, there had been many conflicts. Human colonies had been attacked by stronger species. Human traders had been cheated and exploited. The young human race had faced constant challenges to its survival. But something interesting happened as Ji-Woo studied the records more carefully. Every time a species had directly threatened human existence, That species had eventually disappeared from history. The Krell had attacked human colonies 200 years ago. They had enslaved thousands of human colonists. But then, mysteriously, the Krell had vanished. Every Krell ship, every Krell world, every trace of their civilization had been wiped out. It had taken only a few years for this to happen. The Shex Mora had attempted to conduct genetic experiments on human subjects. They had established hidden research facilities on remote worlds and had kidnapped humans for their studies. The Commonwealth had never officially stopped them because the experiments were being done in secret. But then the Shex Mora had disappeared too. Their research stations had been destroyed. Their home worlds had been abandoned. It was as if humanity had decided that the Shex Mora were a threat that needed to be permanently removed from existence. Ji Woo continued searching through the historical records, and the pattern became clearer and clearer. The Thanagian Collective had tried to establish economic dominance over human trade routes. They had failed. The Zarthian Empire had attempted military conquest of a human colony. They had been defeated completely. The Venobian Syndicate had tried to control human political leadership through manipulation and blackmail. They too had eventually ceased to exist. Each incident followed the same pattern. A species would threaten humanity in some way. The threat would seem to go unanswered for a time, but then the threatening species would begin to weaken. Their ships would start failing. Their planets would fall into disrepair. Their leadership would die under mysterious circumstances. And eventually the entire civilization would collapse. It was as if humanity was not fighting these species openly, but rather working behind the scenes, slowly and systematically eliminating them. Ji Woo realized with growing horror that he was looking at evidence of an ancient war that no one in the Commonwealth officially acknowledged. Humans had been fighting this war quietly, in the shadows, for thousands of years. They had been eliminating threats to their survival without making it obvious that they were doing so. And they had been winning, completely and totally. He compiled all of his findings into a detailed report. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans possessed capabilities far beyond what the Commonwealth had assumed. They had access to technology that allowed them to work in ways that other species could not detect. Most importantly, humans had demonstrated a willingness to do whatever was necessary to ensure their species' survival. They did not hesitate. They did not show mercy. They eliminated problems and moved on. Ji Woo brought his report to High Arbiter Hyun Seo in a private meeting. Hyun Seo listened carefully as Ji Woo explained his findings. When he finished, there was a long silence in the room. Hyun Seo stood and walked to the window, looking out at the earth below them. "How long have they been doing this?" she asked. "Since they achieved space travel," Ji Woo replied, "and possibly even before that. We have evidence of several civilizations that simply vanished without leaving any record of what happened to them. It is possible that humans were involved in those disappearances as well." "They have studied us," Hyun Seo said quietly. It was not a question. "Yes," Ji Woo confirmed. "They have studied every civilization in Commonwealth space. They have learned from our mistakes. They have analyzed our military tactics. They have predicted our responses, and they have built a strategy based on this knowledge." Hyun Seo turned to face Ji Woo. Her eyes showed a mixture of fear and respect. The ancient warnings were not myths. They were lessons learned through painful experience. "The elder species did not disappear because they made mistakes," Ji Woo said. "They disappeared because they threatened humanity, and humanity responded in the only way they knew how. They eliminated the threat." Hyun Seo made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She would go to Earth personally. She would meet with humanity's leadership. And she would try to negotiate a peace before the Commonwealth made the same mistake that had destroyed 1,000 civilizations before them. As Hyun Seo prepared for her journey, Ji Woo continued his research. He studied every piece of information about human culture, human history, and human values. He was trying to understand what made them tick, what motivated them, what they truly wanted from the galaxy. Because if Hyunseo's negotiation failed, if humanity decided that the Commonwealth was a threat that needed to be eliminated, then the next few decades would see the destruction of everything that Jiwoo's people had built. He found one piece of information that gave him hope. Throughout human history, there was a consistent principle. Humans did not threaten species that left them alone. Humans did not attack civilizations that respected human sovereignty. Humans only used their devastating capabilities against species that directly threatened their survival or the survival of species under their protection. This suggested that peace was possible, but only if the Commonwealth was willing to accept human independence and respect human territory. The key to saving the Commonwealth, Jiwoo realized, was convincing the Council that respecting humans was not a sign of weakness. It was a sign of intelligence. It was the difference between survival and extinction. When High Arbiter Hyunseo's ship left for Earth, Jiwoo watched it depart from the research facility. He hoped that she was as wise as he believed her to be, because the future of every species in Commonwealth space might depend on whether she could make the leaders of Earth understand that the Commonwealth meant no threat to humanity. And more importantly, it might depend on whether the leaders of Earth believed that promise. The ancient warnings had survived for thousands of years, for a reason. And now, those warnings were about to be tested in real time. The question was whether the Commonwealth would finally learn the lesson that had been written into the very fabric of galactic history. Do not threaten humans. Do not exploit them. Do not make them fear for their survival. Because if you do, they will remove that threat with a finality that nothing can stop. The conference room was located on the 35th floor of a tall building in Seoul, the largest human city on Earth. From the windows, Hyunseo could see the sprawling metropolis below, filled with millions of humans going about their daily lives. The city was impressive, far more advanced than she had expected from a young species. But what impressed her most was the order and coordination she saw everywhere. Humans had built a complex civilization without appearing to fight with each other. They worked together toward common goals. The humans who sat across the table from her were 4 in number. The oldest was a man named Min-jun, with silver hair and the bearing of a military commander. He sat at the head of the table and spoke with authority that was unquestioned. Next to him sat Captain Teo, the pilot from the Keldorian incident. His eyes were calm and thoughtful, watching Hyunseo carefully. A woman named A-ri occupied the next seat. She was younger than Min-jun, but her posture and the way the others deferred to her suggested she held significant power. The 4th human was Dong-su, a man in his middle years who carried himself with political grace. He was the Minister of External Affairs and would serve as the translator for anything the humans did not wish to express in the common language that all galactic species had learned to speak. Min-jun began the conversation without any preliminary pleasantries. "You know what we are," he said. It was a statement, not a question. Hyunseo chose her words carefully. She had come to this meeting hoping to negotiate peace, but she also knew that humans were not species to be manipulated or deceived. They valued honesty. "I know what you have done," she said. "I know that your species has removed threats to your survival throughout your history." "Eliminated," Teo corrected. It was not a threat, merely a clarification. "We do not remove threats. We eliminate them. There is a difference." "Yes," Hyunseo acknowledged. "I understand the difference." "Do you?" Ari leaned forward. "Because I am not certain that the Commonwealth understands. We have provided evidence. We have left warnings. We have allowed species to encounter us and learn from that encounter. But somehow, the lesson never seems to stick. Every generation of new species rises to power and thinks they are different. They think they can exploit humans without consequence. They think that because we are young, we must also be weak. What changed? Hyun-seo asked. Why have you revealed yourselves now? Why the display at Keldorian? Minjun smiled slightly. Because the mining operation was going to continue. Because the Commonwealth was going to ignore our protests. Because we needed to make a statement that could not be ignored or rationalized away. Captain Taio's mission served that purpose. You have frightened the Commonwealth, Hyun-seo said. Species from across Commonwealth space are demanding to know what Earth's intentions are. Some are calling for military action against Earth before humans become an even greater threat. Let them call for military action, Taio said flatly. They will find that their weapons do not work the way they expected. They will find that their fleets are more fragile than they believed. They will find themselves in a war that they cannot possibly win. This is why I did what I did at Keldorian, so that when they consider military action, they will remember what one human pilot accomplished against their best forces. Hyun-seo felt fear rise in her chest. This was not a negotiation. This was a demonstration of power intended to terrify her. The humans were showing her exactly what would happen if the Commonwealth chose to threaten them. And they were doing it through words and implications, not through actual violence. What do you want? Hyun-seo asked. Eri answered. We want the Commonwealth to acknowledge our sovereignty. We want our borders to be respected. We want any species that enters human space to do so with our permission. We want the exploitation of human colonies to stop immediately. And we want access to Commonwealth records about any research that has been conducted on human subjects without our consent. Those facilities will be shut down, and those responsible will be held accountable. The Commonwealth will never agree to all of that, Hyun-seo said. Many species have performed experiments on your people. Many will resist the idea of accountability. Then they will face the consequences, Dong-su said quietly. We are not interested in debate, High Arbiter. We are making a statement of our requirements. The Commonwealth can accept these requirements, or we can enforce them through methods that will be far more destructive to galactic civilization. Hyun-seo understood what was happening. She was not being asked to negotiate. She was being asked to serve as a messenger. The humans had decided what they wanted, and they were using her to deliver that message to the Commonwealth. If the Commonwealth did not comply, humanity would take action. And based on everything Hyun-seo had learned about human capabilities, that action would be devastating. I will carry your message, Hyun-seo said. But I must tell you honestly, some species will not listen. Some will see your demands as provocation. Good, Minjun said. Then we will have clarity. We will know which species pose a threat to our existence, and we will be able to deal with them appropriately. Hyun-seo felt chilled by the words, but she also understood what Minjun was saying. Humanity was tired of being underestimated and exploited. They had the power to enforce their will on the galaxy, and they were giving the Commonwealth one final chance to accept that power peacefully. There is one more thing, Eri said. She placed a data crystal on the table between them. This is a message from our leadership. You will broadcast it to every Commonwealth channel. You will tell them that this message comes directly from humanity and represents our final offer of peace and coexistence. What if the Commonwealth does not broadcast the message? Hyun-seo asked. Then we will broadcast it ourselves, Taio said. We have already established access to all Commonwealth communication systems. We chose to offer you the honor of delivering the message first. But if you refuse, we will not be offended. We will simply deliver it on our own schedule. Hyun-seo understood that this was a test. The humans were offering her the opportunity to be part of their solution. If she refused, they would see the Commonwealth as a threat and would act accordingly. She picked up the data crystal. I will broadcast this message, she said. And I will do everything I can to convince the Council to accept your terms. That is all we ask, Minjun said. That is all we have ever asked. for species to respect our independence and leave us alone, for the exploitation of human colonies to stop, for the recognition that humanity is not a threat to anyone who does not threaten us first. As Hyun-seo left the conference room, she felt the weight of what she was carrying in her hand. The data crystal in her palm contained words that would change galactic history, and she had been chosen to be the voice that delivered those words. The ancient warnings had been telling the truth all along. Humans were different. Humans were dangerous. And humans were finally tired of hiding that fact. The question now was whether the Commonwealth would listen. Because if they did not, if they chose to see humanity's message as a threat and responded with military force, then the galaxy would learn what the elder species had learned thousands of years before. They would learn why the Krell had disappeared, why the Shex Mora had vanished, why every civilization that had threatened humanity had eventually ceased to exist. The warnings would become tragedy, and the tragedy would be the Commonwealth's own fault for refusing to learn from history. The transmission began at noon, Universal Standard Time. Every communication system in Commonwealth space received the signal simultaneously. On millions of worlds and space stations, billions of beings stopped what they were doing and listened to the message that was about to reshape galactic civilization forever. The voice that came through the speakers belonged to Captain Teo. He spoke in the common language, the speech that all intelligent species had learned to use when communicating with one another. His tone was calm and measured. He did not sound angry or threatening. He simply sounded like a man speaking important truths that needed to be heard. This is Captain Teo of Earth Defense Forces, representing the unified nations and peoples of humanity, the message began. I am speaking to you today because history must not repeat itself. The Commonwealth stands at a crossroads. The decisions you make in the coming weeks will determine whether galactic civilization continues to flourish or whether it falls into a new age of darkness. Teo paused, letting the weight of those words settle on his audience. Somewhere in the Commonwealth capital, High Arbiter Hyun-seo watched the transmission and waited to see what would happen next. For thousands of years, the message continued, our species has studied the ancient ruins that litter the cosmos. We have read the warnings that dead civilizations left behind. We have asked ourselves why the greatest powers that ever existed have simply vanished from galactic history. The answer is simple. They encountered humanity and they failed to respect that encounter. In military command centers across the galaxy, officers leaned forward, listening intently. This was not a threat disguised as diplomacy. This was a straightforward statement of fact. The Krell Empire tried to enslave human colonists, Teo said. That empire no longer exists. The Shex Mora attempted to conduct genetic experiments on our people. The Shex Mora civilization has been completely erased from known space. The Thanagian collective moved against human interests. They too have ceased to exist. These are not coincidences. These are lessons written in the extinction of species that should have known better. Teo's voice remained calm, but the words he spoke carried enormous weight. He was not making accusations. He was stating documented history that the Commonwealth could verify if they chose to investigate. Today, I speak to every species in Commonwealth space with a message of peace, Teo continued. Humanity does not want war. Humanity does not wish to conquer your worlds or control your trade routes. We do not seek to dominate galactic affairs or to establish ourselves as rulers of lesser species. We simply want to be left alone. We want our sovereignty to be respected. We want the exploitation of human colonies to end immediately. And we want the assurance that species will not conduct research on human subjects without our consent. The message paused. Teo allowed a moment of silence, then spoke again. These are not demands born from ambition or greed, he said. These are requirements born from survival. For thousands of years, our species has been hunted, captured, experimented upon, and exploited. We have watched other civilizations grow rich at our expense. We have seen the Commonwealth look away while atrocities were committed against our people. Today, that era ends. In every part of Commonwealth space, leaders of every major species began meeting in emergency sessions. What Teo was saying was clear and unambiguous. If the Commonwealth did not respect human sovereignty, there would be consequences. And those consequences would be severe. Some of you may believe that you can simply ignore this message, Teo continued. Some of you may believe that humanity is not strong enough to enforce our requirements. I understand these doubts. Your species have watched us grow for only 500 years. You have never seen the full extent of what humanity is capable of. Let me clarify this situation for you. Teo provided star coordinates. These are the boundaries of human space, he said. Entry into these boundaries without permission is considered an act of hostile intent. Any military vessel that crosses these boundaries will be disabled. Any research facility conducting experiments on human subjects will be destroyed. Any species engaged in exploitation of human colonies will find that their operations cease to function. These are not threats. These are statements of fact. The coordinates appeared on every government display in the Commonwealth. As the full extent of the territory that humans claimed became clear, many species began to realize something troubling. Humanity was not claiming a small region. Humans were claiming control over an enormous volume of space. If these boundaries were enforced, it would reshape trade routes across the entire galaxy. You may ask yourselves why I am telling you this, Teo said. Why I am announcing these boundaries and these requirements instead of simply enforcing them in silence. The answer is simple. I am offering you a choice. You can accept humanity's sovereignty and continue to coexist peacefully with our species. We will trade with you. We will participate in Commonwealth discussions. We will share knowledge and culture. We will do all of the things that civilized species do with one another. Or you can refuse to accept our requirements. Teo's voice became very quiet. In the silence, his words seemed to echo through every mind that heard them. If you refuse, if you choose to see humanity as a threat that must be eliminated, then I must warn you of what will follow. You will learn what the Krell learned. You will understand why the Shexmora disappeared. You will discover the truth that every elder civilization in galactic history has discovered too late. Some species are not worth threatening. The message ended there. No further words came. The transmission stopped, leaving billions of people staring at their screens, trying to process what they had just heard. A young species that had barely achieved space travel 500 years ago was now openly declaring itself a major power and was making demands on the entire Commonwealth. In military command centers, officers began frantically analyzing the message. Some called for immediate military response. Others urged caution. In diplomatic circles, the debate was equally intense. Some species wanted to unite against humanity. Others wanted to negotiate and accept human sovereignty. And in academic institutions across the galaxy, historians and analysts began pulling records from the ancient archives, trying to verify what Teo had said about the extinct civilizations. High Arbiter Hyun Seo sat in her office and watched the chaos unfold. She had known what was coming, but seeing the galaxy's reaction was still shocking. The Commonwealth was fractured, divided between those who saw humanity as a threat and those who saw no choice but acceptance. She sent a private message to Min Jun. Your message has been received. The Commonwealth is debating how to respond. Some will accept your terms, others will not. What happens now? The response came within hours. Now we wait, Min Jun wrote. We wait for the Commonwealth to make its choice. Those who respect our sovereignty will prosper. Those who do not will learn an expensive lesson. This is how the universe works. This is the law that governs all civilizations. You either respect the strength of other species, or you pay the price for that disrespect. Hyun Seo understood. Humanity had played its final card. The message had been delivered. The boundaries had been established. The threat had been made clear. Everything that happened next would depend on how the Commonwealth chose to respond. In the following weeks, most of the Commonwealth chose the path of wisdom. Species after species acknowledged human sovereignty. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Military doctrines were updated. Research programs using human subjects were shut down. The exploitation of human colonies ended. But not every species accepted these terms peacefully. Some tried to ignore the boundaries. Their ships crossed into restricted space and were disabled. Some attempted to continue their research programs in secret. Their facilities were destroyed. Some species tried to form military alliances against humanity. They quickly learned that such alliances were futile, and slowly, the galaxy began to understand what the ancient warnings had been trying to tell them all along. Humans were not weak. Humans were not to be exploited. Humans were a species that had studied the galaxy carefully and had learned from the mistakes of those who came before them. And if threatened, if pushed too far, humans would do whatever was necessary to eliminate that threat permanently and completely. The era of elder species dominance was over. The era of human ascendance had begun, not because humans conquered anything, but because they had simply decided to stop being victims. And the galaxy, after thousands of years of suffering from its own arrogance, was finally beginning to understand that lesson.